The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, Roadshow Thursday. We're here in the Single Barrel, the Graduate, the location, 9th and P. It feels good to be back home on the road Thursday. Our home away from home, the great folks here at the Single Barrel, carrying at the wall of whiskey right now. And I'm thirsty, but hey, we've got a show to do. You're welcome to come see us here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate. Home football Thursdays, 4 to 6. And, of course, here noon to 2 on Saturday ahead of Nebraska-Northwestern. There's been some recon sent out. A few folks from Northwestern bumping around. Don't worry, they were not in disguise. There were no binoculars. They were just checking out the digs. Great to be with you, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, as we're ready to go. Nebraska-Northwestern, Nebraska-Wisconsin on our mind for this weekend. So plenty of volleyball and football to get into, probably in mixed order. Numbers to get in at 489-1240. 489-1240. Can also dial us up across the state, 1-800-825-5865. So dial the phone, get in on the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. So a lot of you are already in. We'll get there and get to your comments. Email chris@hailvarsity.com. How was the sandwich, Elijah? You are multitasking today just like me. A couple of podcasts to knock out, a couple of shows to do. High school football tonight here locally. I'll have that on flagship station KFOR, Southwest and Millard North. Excited for that. And, oh, yeah, we'll talk a lot of volleyball and football, a lot of football and volleyball. Brandon Vogel of the Counter Read going to be with us in 15 minutes. In hour 2, voice of Husker Volleyball, John Baylor, the great JB. And then Gary Barnett to take us into the rest of hour 2. So how you feeling? How you doing? Question we're going to ask is, do we know Nebraska yet? All right, 6 games in, do we know Nebraska? We'll chew on that a little bit. I have another question. What do you believe about Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA? Let's go there. The NCAA, not once, but twice, have been able to fly to Ann Arbor and have an investigation. Athletic Director Ward Manuel sent out a statement earlier. You'll have nothing but the fullest of cooperation from Michigan. Why is the NCAA in Ann Arbor? The NCAA investigating the University of Michigan football program amid allegations of sign stealing. That announcement from the Big Ten today. I have a confession. I just learned this 20 minutes ago from the great folks here at the Single Barrel. They didn't steal our signs, but Michigan took our signs down for Hail Varsity, and we're getting them put back up. There's some glorious artwork and design and a sweet little butcher's cleaver that are outside here on the northwest part of the Graduate that says, come see Hail Varsity Thursdays and Saturdays. And Michigan's like, nope, take them down. So we've had to put signage back up. So they didn't steal any signs from us, but they were not up there. A little bit too eerie on this Thursday. You have Michigan State waiting. You have Jim Harbaugh that got to watch for 3 games. Elijah, can you imagine Harbaugh pulling a Bobby Valentine with a fake mustache, some brutal glasses, a fake nose even, watching practice against Rutgers, watching practice in Memorial Stadium of Nebraska, watching practice of, dare I say, Eastern Washington or Minnesota? What do you make of this? Would you put it past Harbaugh to push the envelope, bend the rules, buy a cheeseburger, living room wrestling with his shirt off, drinking vitamin D milk, eating probably hard sirloin steaks, all that? Harbaugh's his own dude, and Anonymous chimes in, and it's pretty funny here. In the SEC, if you ain't cheating, you ain't Vanderbilt. I guess Michigan ain't Vanderbilt either. This is wild. This is absolutely wild that Yahoo reported Thursday the NCAA investigating Michigan over possible rule breaking around in-person scouting of opponents. It's bylaw 11.6.1, off-campus in-person scouting of future opponents in the same season is prohibited. You know what? You're innocent till proven guilty, I hope, in this country. And I look at Harbaugh, and I just look at how different of a dude he is. When I put it past him, is he that paranoid? He's got a great football team. He's got an incredible football team. He doesn't need to do it, babe. And now we know why Nebraska got boat raced, Elijah. Is it all becoming clear?
Well, you were talking about the disguise, and I think that's a pretty funny thought that, like, there could be some Husker fan out there. Some Husker fan out there that was sitting next to somebody that, I've never seen him sitting in these seats before.
With a whistle around his neck named Jim.
Or just a pair of binoculars and a notepad. Like, that's kind of funny to me, the thought of some Husker fan out there sitting next to some guy with binoculars in West Stadium. But the thing is like, how much of a disguise would Harbaugh really have to wear? If I saw Jim Harbaugh anywhere in public and he was wearing anything but khakis, I'd be like, nah, it's probably just a guy that kind of looks like Harbaugh. I feel like if Jim Harbaugh was wearing shorts in public, I'd look at him and go, nah, that's not Jim Harbaugh. No, Jim Harbaugh wears khakis.
Because you're used to seeing him in a Michigan coat or hoodie or polo with khakis on, with cleats, with gloves, with a whistle, with a hat. That's his getup. It's weird to see him at Big Ten Media Days when he's in a suit. And sometimes in the suit he wears that damn Michigan hat. And he even wore cleats 2 years ago with his suit. Didn't bother to ask him if he was wearing socks or not. We leave that to the PJ Fleck fashion faux pas. But it would be... Harbaugh probably wears pajamas to bed that are maize and blue, all right? I pray he wears pajamas to bed. Anywho, but Harbaugh accused, or Michigan, the program accused of rule breaking around in-person scouting. Do we have the Greg Schiano halftime? It's been going around Twitter.
Momentarily.
1 minute. Elijah's like, damn you.
It's been one of those days, Schmitty.
I know. The league claims that Michigan, as one source with knowledge of the allegations said, is using a vast network to steal opposing teams' signs. The league told Michigan State it has reviewed film that shows UM clearly knowing what play an opposing team is going to run before the play occurs. Sign stealing is not prohibited by the NCAA unless a team intercepts in-game electronic communication. But, listen, growing up, if it's 3rd down and 2 and there's 87 people at the line, even against some of the great Nebraska teams during the Tommy Frazier era, I knew what was coming. Tommy Frazier looked down the left side of the line. He'd look down the right side of the line. He'd tap his helmet twice, the right side, that right end. He'd reverse pivot, and Gerald Armstrong's wide open for a touchdown. The tight end who had 7 touchdown catches and 14 career receptions. That was Nebraska's audible. Double tap, left and right. It was short side option right. And it didn't matter because neither were stopped. You know what play they'd audible into, and it didn't matter, at least during some of the heydays. But Michigan's a good enough team that it on offense, okay, Michigan's going to do what they do, and that's line up and maul you. Defensively, though, is what we're talking about here with knowing what play the opposition was going to run. It wouldn't matter. They were going to stop you for a yard gain, and they were going to light your quarterback up on 3rd and 8.
Yeah, and Brennan chimes in here, and we've heard this before, too, from like some of those 80s and 90s linemen. They would tell the defensive line what play was coming. Usually that would come more whenever Nebraska's up like 28-0. They'd say, hey, it's coming right through this gap. Like, you better stop it, and the defense still wouldn't be able to stop it. So there is that element, and that's what kind of surprises me about this entire fiasco, if you will. Michigan is like head and shoulders so much better than everyone else that they've played so far this year. Why do they feel the need to go out? And I guess if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying. That's the old quote in sports. But it just feels so crazy to me that like they've been called a mini NFL team. Like, why do you feel the need whenever you're playing Rutgers or Nebraska or whoever? Like, hey, we need
Minnesota.
to know what's coming.
Well, this is funny. Prominently, you look at 2020, and you have some cheating accusations with that Clemson team that outlasted Ryan Day's Ohio State team in 2020. Clemson was touted as the best sign-stealing program in college football. Yet Ryan Day said that Brent Venables seemed to always know exactly what the other team was doing. So Todd Graham's been accused of it by Washington and Utah. You had Bill Snyder accusing Auburn of sign stealing. There's a trend here of SEC or SEC-like programs. The question that faces Michigan is if these recent allegations go beyond on-field sign stealing, sources claim Michigan may have used unnamed individuals to attend games of both schools, scheduled opponents, and possible college football playoff opponents in an effort to gather info on the signs they used to call both offensive and defensive plays. This is a level 2 rules violation related to recruiting during COVID. That's what they got popped for earlier, the dreaded hamburger. Maybe they are so good because they cheat so good. Chris chimes in. Listen, they may do some extra prep work. He may have sent out the Harbaugh army to do this. But when push comes to shove, they are just better than you, whether they know their play or your play or not, on offense or defense. Good luck. This does not warrant, to me, vacating any wins. But it's a pain in the back if you're Michigan going into Michigan State and gearing up for your stretch run. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, you don't need this anymore. Go out, get to a playoff, go win a title, or compete for a title at least, and then get to the NFL. Because this may be the way they force him out of just dominance in the Big Ten and in college football right now. And I know he's not won any titles, but they're working on a 3rd straight playoff. I mean, that's Bama-esque right now.
But I keep on coming back, if these allegations do end up being true, that like Harbaugh being suspended when these come out, it's just like, there's the old saying, I think it's originally from one of the translations of the Bible, I can't quite remember, but idle hands are the devil's workshop. Like, everyone's heard that one before. Jim can't be at practice. Jim can't be at a game. What's he doing? Him and some buddies are taking a roadie. Darn it, he's going to work, even though he legally can't. Can we hear Schiano? I can't confirm that the stream listeners will hear it, but I guarantee that those listening via radio and via podcast will hear it. Okay, let's do the Schiano part. Apologies ahead of time, but you've maybe seen it on social media. Elijah, retweet that bad boy if you can anyway. But Schiano, man, listen to the tone of his voice and just how perplexed he is with this.
Coach, 4 penalties for your team in the first half, some that cost you. How do you clean that up in the second half?
Well, there's some stuff going on out there, so we just got to slow it down a little bit. There's some things going on that aren't right as well, so we'll talk about how to handle it.
This Michigan defense keeping Gavin Wimsatt in this passing game in check. How do you adjust?
Well, just got to keep playing. We're in the game, we just got to keep playing.
All right, thanks, Coach.
There's some stuff going on out there. How do you adjust to what Michigan's defense is doing? Well, Holly, we can't because they know what we're calling, allegedly. Man, I don't know. And I can confirm, unfortunately, our stream listeners could not hear that, but I can also confirm
that tweet is now up on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. So if you want to check out the Schiano quote, you didn't just hear it. It's on Hail Varsity Radio's Twitter feed for you. So that's just a little isolated incident there. We've run into that problem before. We knew it was coming. But on the other hand, at least we're prepared. And hey, most of the people that listen to this, which is podcast and radio form, you heard that loud and clear.
Schiano, the gist of the comment was some stuff is going on. Like, they know our bleeping playbook. That's what it sounded like. That was the tone of Schiano's voice. Does it mean Michigan's 20 points, 28 points, 35 points better than everybody? Well, it helps if you know the plays, but we'll see if the NCAA actually follows through with this, if this derails Michigan at all. Don't think so. We'll get into some Nebraska football thoughts and Husker Volleyball v. Wisconsin. Brandon Vogel's on the way. We're here at the Single Barrel Roadshow Thursday with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Varsity Radio Roadshow today is we're at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate Thursdays on the road. We welcome in Brandon Vogel, counterread.com. Incredible work each week, 2 newsletters each week. Aaron Sorensen, Brandon Vogel cover all your Big Red needs. Vogues, what a two-step on Saturday, Nebraska Northwestern, and then the, dare I say, main attraction, Nebraska-Wisconsin. I want to start with some volleyball before we get to football because, well, demand is what demand is, standing room only and all. And what does this team mean to you? The opener with the 92,000, and now you fast forward to Wisconsin. What's this season, this another big-time season of John Cook and his volleyball team? Our friend Mitch Sherman said a team of destiny. What does Saturday mean for you?
Yeah, obviously, saying it's a big one is probably understating it. The thing that sticks out to me is that Nebraska volleyball's played a lot of big matches recently, right? Just even since their last national title. And somehow this one feels bigger. And I think a lot of that is, Wisconsin's kind of trucking along and has been for a couple of seasons. Certainly has had the better of Nebraska since 2017, essentially. And the Huskers have kind of upped their level to the point where, this was a team where you had a good amount returning, but you also had some new players in key positions. And they've been as good, well, better than advertised. To get to undefeated at this point with, I think, the schedule that Nebraska's played kind of tells you how good they are. And Wisconsin has maybe even played a tougher schedule. So it's two teams who are, it'd be like if we got Georgia-Michigan football right away this week. Slightly different, but, it's just the two teams who have kind of been head and tails, haven't had to sweat things a whole lot. Nebraska, again, on the road against Northwestern, made it look pretty simple. They've just kind of rolled to this point, and it's one of those matchups that you only get not even once a season, once every couple of seasons, with all of the context. So all of the context has kind of come together, mentioning the big time start with 92,000 at Memorial Stadium kind of set this team on a different path, I think.
Dare we get into the dreaded game of the century take? Right? I mean, you say it for football, and we've seen it for football, but maybe it's time to call it that for volleyball.
Well,
could be a preview.
It feels, honestly, that's how I've said it a couple of times. It reminds me of some of those Nebraska-Oklahoma games, particularly because Nebraska hasn't been able to beat Wisconsin recently. I think that adds a little bit to it, but it's going to be an amazing atmosphere, of course. they're not related events, but I can't help but think what a Sunday it will be in Nebraska if the Huskers beat Northwestern on the football field, and then we get like a 5-set classic with Nebraska coming out on top a little bit later over at the Devaney Center.
Brandon Vogel with us from counterread.com. Why has Wisconsin had Nebraska's number?
It's a good question. I mean, they've been it's hard because Nebraska's at such a high level, but, for a while there during this stretch, I think you could say Wisconsin had the advantage at setter. They definitely had the advantage in the middle for a lot of those games during this Husker losing streak, which, dates to 2017 against Wisconsin. And Nebraska during that stretch, obviously really, really talented, obviously a top 5 team throughout that entire time. But in my opinion, it was kind of missing. It's hard to think that there's a level even above what Nebraska is typically at. But you see somebody like Michaela Fecke, a player that is just big in big moments. And when you're playing a team as good as Wisconsin or, a team of that ilk, things get tough, you're out of system, or even if you're in system, it's just a crucial point. Where you're going. You're going to your Michaela Fecke. It's Michael Jordan getting the ball at the end of the game, right? And Nebraska, I don't know if they've truly had that player on the outside in terms of an attacking player. This year, I think they're closer, and I think that's the difference. I think that's why this game feels a little bit bigger, is that the matchup does feel a little bit closer than it has maybe in the past couple of years.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here on Hail Varsity Radio talking Nebraska-Wisconsin volleyball. We'll get to Northwestern here in just a second, but Brandon, 30 consecutive sets won for Wisconsin coming into this matchup. They're as hot as can be. But as for Nebraska, while it hasn't been that level of dominance, they are off to their best start that they have had in years. And whenever you look at what these two teams are doing this year, it feels to me like there's a large gap between these two teams and the rest of college volleyball at the moment. I don't want to call this maybe a preview of the eventual national championship because you never know how a tournament's going to play out, but just am I off base in that it really feels like there's Wisconsin, Nebraska, a gap, and then everybody else? These two teams just feel like they're on a different level.
No, I think you're right. I think they are the only two Power 5, it's a little bit different in volleyball, but Power 5 teams that are still undefeated. And you'll have some lower kind of, or group of 5, I guess, to use that terminology again, conference teams that maybe don't play the type of weekly challenges that you see in the Big Ten that are still undefeated. But in terms of some of the other heavyweights that you're used to seeing up there, Louisville, Kentucky, Florida, who've all taken a loss somewhere along the line. Kentucky took a loss to Nebraska. So I think that does set them apart. It's kind of why, a little bit earlier, I tried not to make the football to volleyball comparison too often because I think they can stand on their own. But why it reminds me a little bit of, Michigan, Georgia this season in football. And I know there's a lot more big time programs that are undefeated in college football at the moment, but just based on how they've played, even if people are wringing their hands a little bit over Georgia, those seem like the two best teams in college football to me at the moment, and the gap seems pretty large. I feel that way about Wisconsin and Nebraska when it comes to volleyball.
Brandon Vogel, can find him with counterread.com, and all the volleyball thoughts and all the football thoughts. And Vogue's going to go to Nebraska Northwestern. We've been kind of arm wrestling all week with this point spread. And is it too large? You'd see Nebraska, Colorado back in the day. Nebraska would be favored by 3 touchdowns or 17, and the Buffs had always covered. Not only is Northwestern typically covered, they've won outright. It's not been a pleasant walk in Evanston or even in Lincoln. You got to go back a ways, 2 years, to the last time you really blew them out. You don't win by double digits hardly ever in this series. You've won by a Hail Mary. You've lost in overtime. That threshold's been around 28 points for Northwestern. They get there, and that's the magic number against Nebraska. Nebraska's defense hasn't allowed a lot of points to teams not named Colorado or Michigan. So what's your temperature like right now with this ball game? Nebraska tried to stack, dare I say it, back-to-back conference wins together.
Yeah, so, at Circa Sports opened this game on Sunday, I think at -10 for Nebraska. Maybe there was another place that had it opened earlier than that, but that's always the one I look for. And to see it go up from there has surprised me a little bit. I can tell you this, the statistical models are kind of all over the place on this game. PredictionTracker.com tracks more than 50, projections, and they range. This is pretty rare that this happens. They range from Northwestern -1 to Nebraska almost -15. So, and the average there of 50 plus projections is Nebraska by about 7. So I agree with you. The line feels a little bit high to me, and I think some of that's just kind of residual, like a lot of the stuff Matt Rhule talked about this week. I'm just trying to get this team to be the same week to week, because prior to this, Nebraska was not good as a favorite. Not in terms of cover. Well, it wasn't good in terms of covering spread, but it wasn't even that good in terms of winning straight up. It was a team that didn't do well when it was expected to have an advantage. Is this team past that? Has Matt Rhule gotten there? In some ways, I think it's the biggest challenge that he's trying to overcome is just the mentality of hey, we're not going to be the team that's good once we get punched in the mouth, and we're not going to be the team that's not as good when we should have an edge. We're just going to be as good as we are, which sounds simple, but I think it's hard to get there. In a lot of ways, I think this game is a good test of that. I expect Nebraska to handle a run game from Northwestern that hasn't been very good. I think if that happens, they'll be able to get to the quarterback, which could make things tough for Northwestern. So right now it's early. I'd lean towards Nebraska, and I'd lay the points at this point, but it's tough to get over what we've seen in the recent past, because there's been a lot of games here where you're like, oh yeah, Nebraska should win this, and then things were either too close for comfort or not comfortable at all by the time you got to the end of it.
Brandon, based on where Nebraska and Northwestern have been really this season, Nebraska trying to show some progress, does Nebraska need to get a comfortable win in order to prove that there is progress, or is just a win still at this point in the season?
Yeah, I think given the state of the West Division and it still being pretty open in my opinion, I think a win is a win at this point. I think people would feel a lot better if this game looked like the Northern Illinois game. That's kind of the one game where Nebraska was, a double-digit favorite, came out, covered that line. Didn't quite get it done against Louisiana Tech, but was close. You look at the rest of the schedule, this is, I don't like to use this term, but quote unquote, the easiest game left. They won't be a double digits favorite over anybody else the rest of the way. It's just, it's not in the cards. So can it look like that? That's kind of the, I think, challenge for Nebraska. It was interesting that I think that Rhule, and I know you guys talked about it earlier in the week, named Harburg right away on Monday. That was kind of a lingering thing for me during the bye week. I think that tells us a little bit about where they're at. I'm also interested to see, you kind of you got embarrassed by Michigan, the easy motivation button to push against Illinois. You got it done using that. Now it's well, you're expected to beat Northwestern. Can you come out and do it? That's a different challenge. So I think we'd learn something about Nebraska if they pick up the win, regardless of how big it is.
Brendan Vogel's with us. Vogues, a quick thought on this storm that is the NCAA in Michigan. They're going back for a sequel.
Yeah. I haven't had a whole lot of time this afternoon to dig deeply into it, much to my chagrin. I saw the notifications. I was like, oh my gosh, what? Because, what Michigan has done so far this season is kind of unassailable. I mean, they're just mashing teams. They look as good as they've been the last 2 years. They look like they've taken a step beyond that. And now you have this, notice of allegations, at least, that, well, maybe you're not quite doing this by the book. And boy, like, what a story that becomes depending on where this goes. You've got this great team. Harbaugh was talking about setting NFL draft records in the preseason, and he might do it. But, like, it turns out you were, getting cards dealt to you off the bottom of the deck, so to speak. Well, that changes a lot about how this team is perceived, no matter how the rest of their season ends. And I don't think things got any easier for Michigan. Now, their tough games are still a couple of weeks away, but things didn't get any easier because now the story is this. The story is, are you cheating?
And the paranoia that surrounds Harbaugh, just a different guy. I mean, people that work for him or work with him are respectful, but he's just Jim, right? He's just Jim Harbaugh. And would you put it past these allegations, right? Innocent until proven guilty, but does it sound outlandish, fellas, if Harbaugh was to do some advanced scouting? I don't know if it was in person because he was suspended, but to send folks out there to try and steal signs. That's what these accusations are. And I don't know how many giant whiteboards are up on the sideline with a picture of Jim Rome, the Oregon Duck, Fred Flintstone, and a ribeye, or whatever the Oregon cards used to be. But you can do some work there. You can do some work through film study. And Elijah, you even played earlier in the day the Schiano interview. Like, dude, something's up. This is a mystery machine moment where. There was not a declaration or an accusation by Schiano, but man, he felt like, dude, they got us. Someone faxed a copy of the old playbook over.
Well, you use the term outlandish, Schmitty, and the thing is like the thought of a team as good as Michigan needing to resort to something like this to get an advantage, that seems outlandish. But at the same time, Jim Harbaugh, talking about outrageous. The dude's got more rushing yards than Bo Jackson in the NFL, and that sounds even more outrageous than the fact that Michigan's using like some cheating methods in order to gain an advantage. But that's a true statistic. Jim Harbaugh more rushing yards than Bo Jackson. So if that's
not
true,
in
maybe this is true.
Not in Tecmo, the dreaded
life.
the turbo button. Elijah,
that's a really good number. I'd never heard that before. My mind is kind of blown by that. My mind was not blown by the allegations against Michigan. It wasn't a moment where I was like, what? Michigan stealing signs? No way. It was, and it's not like
they don't have to.
My mind wasn't blown, but it's not like, it kind of runs counter to, Harbaugh's image of like, I just like to drink glasses of milk and good old fashioned football, right? Like, who needs to steal signs? That said, like, he's just kind of a mystery guy, a person in his own orbit, which I can respect. Like, it's pretty entertaining. So I think that's why it's kind of tough to put anything past him. Even if you can look at this and be like, dude, you got a team where you don't need to do that. Like, just play the plays without knowing what they might be, and you'll probably win majority of them anyway.
Well, as Alanis Morissette once said, Jim, you ought to know. Your team is good enough to win without those signs.
Thank you. Vogues, tell folks about Counter Read real quick before we say goodbye.
Yeah, it's a new project from myself and Aaron Sorensen. We've worked together for more than a decade, and kind of the log line is Nebraska sports stories, hopefully well told. Well, not hopefully, but I added that part of it. We think they're well told. Twice weekly, you can become a paid subscriber. That gets you those two stories each week. We also do a couple of free stories each week. We're kind of everywhere out and about. So you can check us out at counterread.com. My preview for the Northwestern Nebraska game went up this morning. Still plenty of time to check that out before game time. So love to see you over there.
All right. At Brandon L. Vogel. Find him on Twitter, counterread.com. Vogues, we'll talk Saturday. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Good to spend time with Brandon Vogel. More on this Michigan cheating scandal as the NCAA is investigating. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel were on the road here today, a roadshow Thursday at the Single Barrel. Incredible steaks, the wall of whiskey, the cold beer if you need it, chops. It is glorious. The food is so good here at the Single Barrel. Inside the Graduate 9th and P, if you are debating whether or not to stay here for a football Saturday, do it. For a volleyball Saturday, do it. And you won't be disappointed with an incredible meal, wonderful facilities here that are just super comfortable and cozy. And I'm seeing about every replay of Ohio State, Penn State, that's on. Michigan's kind of stolen the headlines today. But we'll get into volleyball as Nebraska v. Wisconsin on the docket. Nebraska's already done their job setting attendance records in person globally. They may set some viewership records, BTN, when it comes to Nebraska-Wisconsin. The voice of Husker Volleyball, dear friend, mentor John Baylor, coming up in 15 minutes. We'll get JB's take on things, all volleyball, and he might have a Harbaugh thought or two. Gary Barnett, he'll weigh in and get his take on a program near and dear to his heart, is Northwestern.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Brandon Vogel, John Baylor coming up, voice of Husker Volleyball, Gary Barnett in hour 2. Hail Varsity live here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate. Amazing steaks, whiskey, and all sorts of fun with friends. Your home game hangout, you're invited here whenever you get down to Lincoln in the Single Barrel. Great steaks and chops to choose from. We'll be back here noon to 2 on Saturday as it's the weekend edition, Hail Varsity Roadshow, getting you ready for Nebraska and Northwestern. 489-1240, 489-1240, numbers to get in. And a reminder about buckling up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Shane chimes in on the stream. Can watch the show on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Maybe the athletic director self-reported just so they could negotiate Harbaugh's new contract after trying to fire him after 3 years. Shane also touches on I hate Michigan, but come on, man. Can the NCAA be more useless at this point? Do you know there is such thing as video? How is this any different? Ridiculous. And I'm trying to find on the schedule, Elijah, who Jim Harbaugh would have to go steal signs against. They've been punished verbally by about everybody. Big Ten, SEC, Pac-12, talking heads for their schedule anyway. And they looked dominant against Minnesota. They looked dominant against Nebraska. They've looked dominant against Indiana. And then the only struggle bus was Rutgers when it was 14-7 at halftime.
Well,
This is funny.
Think of how different the reaction would be if it was Indiana who was caught stealing signs. Everyone across the country would probably have a reaction similar to Shane's and be like, who cares? Like, if you can see a sign on the TV broadcast, how different is that? Like, Indiana needs all the help they can get. It doesn't matter. But the fact that it's Michigan and the fact that it's the number 2 team in the country who's been steamrolling everybody they've played this year, that's what makes this a little bit different. That's what kind of makes it comical. That's why I wonder if they're going to get the hammer dropped on them, because let's be honest, the people who are in the NCAA, they're just people too, and they're also going to look at this the same way and be like, why the hell is Harbaugh and Michigan, of all people, stealing signs? It's kind of like similar to Deflategate with Tom Brady and the Patriots, where you go, you already have the best quarterback in the NFL. You're already bound to go win a Super Bowl this year. Why do you want footballs that are 3 PSI less? Does it really matter all that much? Or Spygate with the Patriots as well. Like, the exact same thing. You go, you're the freaking Patriots. Why are you scouting illegally the New York Jets? You're going to beat them by 21 anyway.
Paranoia. Harbaugh's attorney, Tom Mars, has issued a statement. I've spoken to Coach Harbaugh about what we've read in the sports news, and if the NCAA's rules allowed him to make a public statement. I'm sure he would deny having any knowledge of what was reported. Pretty deft move by Mars. The not-so-subtle commentary on the stupidity of the NCAA rule that apparently prevents Harbaugh from saying anything on his own behalf. He can't comment on an ongoing NCAA investigation. I'm sure he'd deny it, but you know what? Per NCAA rules, you can't hand out a cheeseburger, and you sure as heck can't comment on an ongoing investigation. Nebraska and Wisconsin, game of the century, volleyball. John Baylor's next, hour 2 on Hail Varsity here at the Single Barrel.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you at Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Roadshow Thursday as we're here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate. Roadshow Thursdays, home football weeks, and back here on Saturday, more on this Jim Harbaugh cheating accusation by the NCAA. We'll get there. Gary Barnett coming up. The world will be watching Saturday. They'll be listening Saturday as it's Nebraska versus Wisconsin. Husker Volleyball as good as it gets. And a man that's got a chance to be right there with it for so many years, as good as it gets. John Baylor, play-by-play voice of Husker Volleyball with us. JB, we love him, we know him, and can follow John on Twitter at _John Baylor. JB, how are we doing on a Thursday? Thanks for jumping on with us.
Smitty, hello. Elijah, fire up. I love Hail Varsity. You know, where's the latest on the Hail Varsity media empire? Is the magazine still around?
It is not, my friend, but Mike Babcock's giving you a couple of stories a week, which is incredible. So
awesome.
we are chugging away this 2023 season, and we're posted up like Robert Parrish down here at the Single Barrel.
Chief, I love it.
How fired up are you, JB?
This is going to be a fun match, guys. Game of the century for this century. We had a couple football versions last century, but 1 versus 2, undefeated, and I don't know about these StubHub prices. I mean, are people really spending $260 to get a standing room only spot to get into the Vanny on Saturday? That's remarkable.
They are, and they're going for more than the standing room only. If you want courtside, because folks are paying it. John, you've seen the machine that is Nebraska volleyball, and you've seen it win championships. You've seen it vie for championships, and you've also seen it transition into the Big Ten. And from your view, Bud, what do you love about this team, and what makes them special? Yes, talent, but from your vantage point, what have you noticed about this year's crew with Coach Cook?
Well, I just felt like just a new energy, a new belief, a new swagger just was injected this year with these 5 freshmen and then the transfer merit beasts. And you only got 14 players on the team, of which 6 are brand new. And the talent is stunning. Sure, we had the number 1 recruiting class in the country 2 years ago. They're all juniors now, Lindsey Krause and Alec Batenhorst and Kennedy Orr and Lexi Rodriguez. But, boy, this group just even made a higher impact at an earlier time. I mean, right away. I mean, Bergen Riley takes over at setter, and Harper Murray is one of the top freshmen in the country right away. And part of it's the chemistry. They knew each other from before. They've been playing on all these junior national teams, and they knew each other from playing in the Dream camp that is Nebraska's recruiting secret sauce, along with their great assistant coach, Jalen Reyes, who's a terrific recruiter, easily the best in the country. And so it all came together. And this group apparently was at the Wisconsin match as juniors, and the Huskers lost that match. And afterwards, up in the Husker offices, just basically said in their own words that that's not going to happen when we get here. So just a belief that they had long before they even arrived, a chemistry that they had long before they even arrived, and a talent that probably even surpasses the great talent our junior class has.
John Baylor's with us, Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow here at the Single Barrel. Game of the Century is right. Nebraska-Wisconsin, Saturday night at the Devaney Center. And John Baylor are going to be on the call for it yet again. Another monster tilt John gets to see and describe. I love it. So you mentioned chemistry and talent. How about management? Talk to me about Coach Cook and his ability to do the right thing, and that's play the best, but also create that culture and that atmosphere.
Oh, well, game of the century, Schmitty, but no one's talking about keys to our house this time around, thank goodness. But,
no Broderick Thomas, I know. There's
no keys, and there's no keys anymore anyway. There's no key fobs either. No key fobs to any houses. But no one will outwork John Cook. No one will out-scheme him. He just is constantly thinking. His day begins at dawn, and you don't see him out in downtown Lincoln late at night because he's just laser focused on one thing, and that's improving his team. What can he do to improve? And so the Huskers are known for adjustments before a match, adjustments during a match, and they're always looking for angles. He's always trying to find an advantage. Everything he's done is just trying to figure out how to get 2 points better than every opponent every set. It's just remarkable what he's done. Like you got 24 years, 4 national championships, 6 more Final Fours. 3 of those were national runner-ups. He's won 87% of his matches that he's coached at Nebraska. He's cycled through all sorts of assistant coaches, not because they're not hyper talented here. It's because other teams immediately hire them away once they've worked in this system, because it's a stunning culture. It's a culture where you know over 24 years, and really going back to 24 years when head coach Terry Pettit was here. That's 48 straight years that you just don't have any let up. It's just stunning. And we've learned from other sports that you don't take this for granted, and it typically doesn't go on forever. Well, for volleyball, over 48 years. And we look at Devaney, Osborne, and Solich, that was 43 years. So just the continuity, the results, no matter what conference you're in, what changes have occurred to the game, well, how many more teams have how much more talent and are legitimate challengers for a national championship. Coach Cook has always been right there, and this year is no exception. It's just another special group.
It's John Baylor with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, talking Husker Volleyball, previewing what Nebraska faces in Wisconsin on Saturday evening. And John, there's an old quote, I can't remember who first said it, but it goes like, it's hard to get to the top, but it's even harder to stay there. And over 24 years, John Cook has stayed at or near the top, and there's been so many special years during that time. But whenever you look at 2023, from Volleyball Day in Nebraska, filling up Memorial Stadium, to this start to this season, the chance they have on Saturday, does this season have the potential to be a crown jewel type season for John Cook when you look at his entire career at Nebraska?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. My role in this whole operation is to manage expectations, and I'm doing a horrible job of that this season. But from the moment it started, Elijah, I just felt this had the makings of something special. I mean, you had the disappointing end of last year when the Huskers had 3 setters, but really none of them emerged as reliable. And in an adverse match against a top opponent, and still that team, with all those challenges, got to the regional semi, had a very talented Oregon team on the ropes, had 4 match points in that match, and just somehow couldn't close it out, and then lost in the 5th. And then you had the big makeover. You had 6 players leave. You had 6 players come in. And as I suggested, just a brand new injection of energy and talent, and expectations were always the same. But this year, you just felt like, man, something special is happening here. And then, they pull off this stadium game, which has really caught the imagination of the country and maybe the world. It's way beyond volleyball, and it's maybe it's beyond women's sports. Maybe it's reached a level of, hey, if you just stop holding people back and you give them opportunity, just watch what they can do. Because remember, the great-grandmothers of those players who are on farms, and the grandmothers, depending on how old they are, grew up on farms or grew up in Nebraska, or they grew up in Texas or Illinois, they weren't able to play organized sports. And now their granddaughters or their great-granddaughters are playing in front of 92,000 with tears down a lot of the faces during the tunnel walk and beyond the tunnel walk. And so that kind of set the stage, you're right, Elijah. And then they haven't mowed down competition. It's been pretty competitive of late. They've shown vulnerabilities, but heck, you got 29 regular season matches. You still got 6 more weeks. I mean, at some point you're going to have inconsistency. But at this point, other than the 5-set Purdue match on the road, they haven't even gone 5. They've rarely trailed in sets, and they're going to have their premier competition on Saturday. Because I hope we don't judge this season solely on the destination. I hope we look back at all these marvelous points, no matter how it ends up. But the teams that really have a shot of a national championship, there's probably 10 of them, but I mean, Stanford's right there. And then there's Wisconsin and Nebraska and probably Louisville. And then you have a little fall off, but they're in a great spot right now with now 5.5 weeks left in the regular season.
Couple minutes left. John Baylor, voice of Husker Volleyball, with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Roadshow Thursday here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate, 9th and P. So I got the choo-choo. I was hoping I would get the choo-choo sound effect, JB, and we got it in, and that makes me smile. I'm interested in Saturday night's kind of keys, not to get too far in the weeds, my man, but just, what makes you feel good about Nebraska's chances? Obviously the talent. What is imposing about Wisconsin despite their history? They're incredible. But tell me what you think of this matchup, or how Nebraska gets it done.
Smitty, I couldn't go the whole interview without giving some extra. But this is when I try to manage expectations. I mean, Wisconsin as a team is hitting 315. If you have a single player hitting 315, you've got an elite All-American caliber player. If you have a team that hits better than 300 in a match, you're going to win 96% of the matches. If you have a team hitting 315 for a year, the only chance an opponent has is if you're bad defensively. Well, opponents are only hitting 143 against Penn State. So you've had some Texas teams, Logan Eggleston a couple of years ago, and last year when they would win the national championship, they're hitting 320. I mean, it's crazy, but they couldn't pass the volleyball. They couldn't, or they could. They were not that strong defensively. So you had a shot against them, and Nebraska took down one of those big offensive juggernaut Texas teams 2 years ago. Down in Austin in the regional final, one of the great Husker victories of all time. This team doesn't have weaknesses. They're a juggernaut offensively. They're as prodigious as any offensive team at this level I've ever seen. But they've got great back row defenders. They've got huge blockers. So they don't have a single offensive player, attacker, I should say, a player that swings and attacks the volleyball hitting under 300. So you got, 6'9", Anna Schmreck. You've got Devin Robinson is one of the great right sides in the country. She didn't play last night because they had to go when they swept Ohio State with a one-setter offense. So that means you have one fewer attackers. So Devin Robinson doesn't get to play. So they're absolutely loaded. Nebraska's got to cut down on the service errors. Nebraska's got to really feed off the crowd and stagger the Badgers a little bit, because the Badgers have won all of their sets since the conference season started. They struggled early on because they got some transfers. They got 7 transfers. So they're trying to put together a team. They didn't lose a game, but they went 5 3 times. So early on they staggered. They've just been annihilating competitors for over a month now. So Nebraska's got to land a good punch early, stagger them, make them start disbelieving, keep the serves in, just keep pressing. But the Huskers, frankly, are the underdog. I mean, this is a veteran team They start 4 seniors. Nebraska starts 4 freshmen. So there you go.
John,
90 seconds. What atmosphere are you expecting as we say goodbye Saturday?
I've never been to Mardi Gras. No, I haven't. But it's going to be a sober Mardi Gras. Every year I think it can't get any bigger. I think that Nebraska volleyball, it's reached the zenith. I mean, all the games have been sold out since 2001. I mean, how the heck can this thing get any bigger? And it just gets bigger. Tickets are tougher to come by. There's no way you're getting in this Devaney Center tomorrow unless you got tickets, or you're really going to shell out a lot of dough. The energy for this. Remember, Wisconsin's beaten Nebraska 10 times in a row. I think that adds to it. The fans just desperately want this, and we got to stay calm. We can't want it too badly. We know how that can kind of work against the Huskers sometimes when the fans want it too badly. The great thing is these players have short memories, and few of them have ever even played Wisconsin. You know, the one player, ironically, wearing a Husker jersey tomorrow night, I guess it would be 2 nights from now, who's beaten Wisconsin is Merritt Beeson. She won against them as a Florida Gator last year. All these other Huskers know one thing against Wisconsin, they've lost. But so many of them are new, they haven't experienced that. So, and remember, they came in here with the belief. They told their future coaches, we're not going to let this happen again. I think the mindset will not hold back Nebraska. I think physically, though, Wisconsin's as imposing a team at this level we've ever seen. They do run 2 setters. One of them's been injured a little bit. We'll see if MJ Hamill's healthy on Saturday night. If they go with 1 setter, they'll be just fine with Izzy Ashburn. But this is a formidable test. It's not the season on the line. We'll get them again after Thanksgiving. But what a great moment for women's sports and women's volleyball.
Well, John, if it's Mardi Gras in there, I'll bring the beads.
I love it. Toss them around.
John Baylor, voice of Husker Volleyball. Our friend Jeff in the stream says it's time to wake some babies, as JB would say, in the North Bottoms. John, you're the best, brother. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes today.
Great to talk to you, Schmidt. Take care, my friend.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate 9th and P. And big weekend. And former Northwestern coach stand out in their Hall of Fame. Also live in Boulder. We say hi to Gary Barnett. Coach, how's your week? Thanks for a few minutes today.
Well, I got a little bye week this week, Chris, after that debacle last Friday night. We have to live with it. Here, it's a lot worse for coaches and players than it is for me, but they got to live with that for 2 weeks before they get to play again. So for me, I got a little slow week, not a lot of homework to do, but a little golf and try to corral Kramer.
Yeah, your pup Kramer. So cards on the table. Every Thursday, I send a picture of the pup that visits our studio here in Lincoln, and today was a Huskadoodle. He was half husky, half poodle, and I was like, Coach, you need a little Huskadoodle in your life. And Coach, you're like, no. Tell folks about Kramer, because Kramer's your little pup that's going to grow up to be, sounds like a football watching buddy.
I don't know. Kramer's a little Shih Tzu. He's we got him. He was about 4 pounds, and now he's about 9. But he's only 4 months old. But I keep wanting him to act like a 2-year-old pup instead of a 4-month-old pup. So he's a bit of a pain, but he's a great little dog. We're having fun.
I love that. Yeah. That's good.
He looks like a little Ewok.
He does. He does.
Yeah. Makes these little sounds, but then he barks. So
is he a college football connoisseur? Does he make you change the channel? Sometimes my German Shepherd will kind of whine at me if I don't turn it back on to a different game. She's been known to do that.
No, I just throw the little bear or duck that he has, and he chases it. And he comes back. I got to keep doing it all day long, and then he does tell me when he wants to walk.
Okay.
And he barks, just gets mad.
That's funny.
But that's all he's got so far.
Well, did he have a warning or a bark as you stayed bundled up. Did you have that sink-in feeling against Stanford last Friday?
No, I didn't. I did
okay.
in the second half, because if you haven't had something like this happen to you, you haven't coached. And everybody can make all sorts of decisions sitting in their living room, eating a hot dog and having a Budweiser as the play unfolds. And it's, when you're in the heat of the moment, you're trying to find an answer. And I equate it to being in a storm drain, going down in circles, and you're reaching out to grab something to hold on to keep you from going all the way down the drain. And there's nothing there. And that's sort of what happens when this goes on. And, it started off with they get the ball coming out the second half, a 29-point lead, and they go for it on fourth down, and they don't get it. And so now it's a short field. The team scores, and they go back and they get a fourth down. They punt it down to the 3-yard line. They throw a 97-yard touchdown pass, and then it just starts to happen. Two more fourth down attempts that end up in sacks, and they couldn't get out of it. They have a chance. They're in the second overtime. It's first and goal on the 2-yard line. First and goal on the 2. Picture this. You go backwards on 2 runs, and then you throw a pick. And, it ended just the way it sort of started in the second half. But it was a beautiful first half for CU. But Stanford hung in there, did a great, great job, changed the defense at halftime, and they did a great job.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. We're here at the Single Barrel Roadshow Thursday. Coach, those comebacks are legendary. Those collapses are lessons, and you try and kind of replicate one and learn from the other. I want to ask you about Nebraska and Northwestern. Matt Rhule's, they're doing a series. It's GB Rewind, and now we're on to episode 3, and Rhule's been a really great motivator. We talked motivation last week, and he's really got the pulse of his kids, and what he has kind of preached to them, they are seeing happen, and that's rewarding. The team's getting better. Talk to me about winning with grit for a little bit versus winning pretty, the gritty versus the pretty. It's been a theme around Nebraska for their baseball for a while. And sometimes you have to embrace that, don't you, as a coach? If you can't, or your team's not ready to do everything maybe you think you want to do, but you got to look and analyze what they can do. And is there some beauty in winning in a gritty way in the Big Ten?
Well, winning anywhere, gritty travels. Okay, gritty gets internalized. Pretty doesn't. Pretty you just watch, and it doesn't travel. And so you really the game was made to be played with grit and experience grit. And so when you can play with that and win or lose, it makes a mark on you as a team, makes a mark on you as an individual. And it's the lesson that you want learned. The other one isn't. Mm-hmm. And so, that doesn't surprise me. When Matt took over at Temple, good grief, you think he didn't have a chance to win pretty ever. And so once you internalize that, it becomes part of who you are as a team, then you're in every game, no matter what. Nobody, there's a way that you can do this if you just work at it and put your mind to it and believe in it. You have to believe in it. And grit gives you belief.
Do you have to go find, or is that part of the evaluation process, Coach, when it comes to recruiting, finding guys that have gritty personalities?
Well, I think so. Everybody does it a little bit different, but to me, the number one thing I always wanted was, does he really love the game? Mm-hmm. Does he love the game of football? And it's ironic because Deion Sanders' theme has been loving the game. And when he got upset after this game, he said they don't love the game. They just love what the game gives them. And you got to love the game. And he expressed how much every minute he played the game, he did it because he just fell in love with the game and loves it. And that's what you're trying to find in players. And you're not going to have a team of 85. You wish you did, but guys who love the game will do things for the game and do things for a purpose other than just their own self-indulgences. So it's to me, that's the essential quality of a recruit, is how much does he really love the game of football.
Gary Barnett with us, few minutes, Hail Varsity Radio. What do you make, and how much have you seen of this Northwestern team, and what's your reaction to the job Coach Braun's done?
Well, I haven't watched them, frankly, and to be 3 wins, to about 3-3 at this point in time, it's pretty remarkable coming off of a 1-win season where you probably had more good players. And so you got to give these kids credit, and they're playing for a purpose. I mean, they have a real purpose, and that's what you're seeing happen here. Is when you're playing for a cause higher than yourself, you're gonna you give it all. You give it your all the time, and it shows up. And for this team to be 3-3 at this point in time is pretty remarkable. You look at their stats, and the stats are unremarkable totally, but and their wins aren't really impressive wins, just like Nebraska's wins aren't really impressive wins. I mean, the Illinois win's a big win, but then you can say that the Minnesota win for Northwestern's a big win. But they're sitting there just about the same kind of teams statistically. Nebraska should be way ahead of Northwestern, but Northwestern's got a cause, and that's why they're sitting where they are now, and they have a chance because they have a cause.
What's the cause in your eyes?
Well, I think the cause is just the disrespect that was thrown onto their program before it even started back in the summer when everything happened. They get lumped into that whole package of criticism and blame for things that are inappropriate. And I think that's what they're feeling. That's the cause that they have. They're trying to show that isn't them. That isn't what their program's been about, and that's why I think they're playing as decently as they are. They're limited because they don't have the same, they lost some players, and they're coming off a 1-11 season, my gosh, or whatever it was. So, they've got, I don't want to call it disrespect because just lack of respect is probably a better word.
They are so galvanized, and Braun, at least to my view, has been somebody that's kind of dealt with this, and guys are playing hard, and they're dangerous. And, Nebraska Northwestern coach, and you've seen and you've done some of these games, or at least, been on hand for them. I mean, this thing's always just going to cause you to sweat if you're in a headset. I mean, it's always been tight. And Northwestern a lot of times has found a way to make it happen. Yeah,
it's always been one of those games where you got to watch the whole game, and it doesn't end until the last play is run. And so it's been a sort of a unique rivalry, Chris. I mean, it was just created because Nebraska went in the Big Ten. There was nothing else to it, and then all of a sudden, every game became one that it was must-watch TV. So it's just sort of organically developed. It's not anything that has history or anything like that. It's just been a sort of organic rivalry that's been created.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio here at the Single Barrel. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. More from Coach Barnett. Get his take on the weekend slate of games as Harbaugh's come out with an official statement. So we've got that posted on social media. Nothing's going to happen in the immediate future today, tomorrow, or Michigan State weekend. But we'll see what transpires more with Coach Barnett here at the Single Barrel, 9th and P, here till 6, and then back here Saturday from noon to 2 ahead of Nebraska Northwestern.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Gary Barnett, couple minutes with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, Nebraska Northwestern week. As coach, of course, taking the Cats to the Rose Bowl. So how dangerous a week is it for Wisconsin? That was a snot knocker. That was an incredible game where quarterbacks were endangered species. Both quarterbacks got the hell kicked out of them by big old defensive linemen. Really enjoyed that game. Now Wisconsin's got to travel to Illinois. Illinois on the heels of a walk-off at Maryland, Coach.
Well, to me, whenever you play Iowa, you come out of that game just beat the snot. I mean, and that's what happened to Wisconsin. They're favored in this game by 2.5, but that was a huge win for Illinois. Huge, absolutely huge. And so, I don't know where to go with this game. I mean, Wisconsin 2.5, it's at Illinois. I don't know. Wisconsin's beat up. They've got to be. So I don't know where to go with that game, Chris.
It's a backup quarterback too. I mean, your main guy is gonna Mordecai's got to have a pin put in his hand, or already has.
Yeah.
Sparty hosts Michigan. Michigan's just a machine. That's -24. That might be kind.
That might be kind. Michigan. There's always an attitude in that game. And it's hard to say which way it goes, but Michigan State doesn't have the players to beat Michigan, but they probably have the motivation. And so, can they, not lose by less than 24, possibly. But Michigan is probably the most well-oiled machine that's out there right now, I think.
What do you think of Minnesota? Minnesota is at Iowa. This number's 3.5. We know Iowa's challenged offensively. Their defense is incredible, and they got a couple big plays on offense. Minnesota, I like their quarterback, but they're not what they've been, is in my estimation, just seeing them a couple times.
I think Minnesota thought Kalamankis was going to be a really great player for them, and I just think that he hasn't panned out. I'm a little bit like you, surprised at Minnesota not playing any better. Iowa now can sense it. Iowa can end up playing in the championship game. They control their own destiny here. But when you can't score points, if you can't score, then you got a chance to lose every game. And you just can't totally depend on that defense. I mean, all you got to have is somebody that's got an offensive plan that can make it work and score 14 points. You score 14 points, you're probably going to beat Iowa. And so, you think that wouldn't be very hard to do, but against that defense, it is. So, I mean, this could be a 17-14 game with somebody winning. And Minnesota could win this game pretty easily if they could find a way to just score probably 17 points.
Well, their defense is so good, Iowa's, but man, their offense just brings them back down to earth. Too much so. Ohio State, Penn State. What happens here? Buckeyes -4.5, game of the weekend.
Well, history tells you Penn State will win this game. Ohio State will win this game because Franklin's record against top 10 opponents isn't very good. I think he's won one time. And top 5 opponents. I think Penn State wins the game. I think Ohio State has not hit on all cylinders all year. And I don't see why they should all of a sudden hit on all cylinders against a really great defense. I think Penn State actually may have more good players than Ohio State. It's just whether or not they don't screw it up. I think Ohio State's favored by 4.5 when I saw it. Might be less than that now, but I think Penn State wins this game outright.
Okay, so Coach Barnett says the Nittany Lions. Tennessee, Bama, revenge for the Tide. That's -9. That seems high.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. I'd take Tennessee in the points. Bama may win this, but and Tennessee isn't quite as good as I thought they were going to be, but they can be. Mm-hmm. And but I take the points on Tennessee every day on this one.
Is Oregon in a weird spot? They had that was an awesome game. Washington, Oregon was incredible. Lanning was a little bit too gambler happy for my liking. Washington State got drilled. They've looked incredible. They've lost a couple in a row. They got drilled at home by Arizona, and I think Arizona's really kind of a team that's creeping right now. They've put 3 really good weeks together, and they finally got the payoff and won against Washington State. But if I'm Oregon, I don't like seeing Washington State coming in on a 2-game losing streak.
Well, Arizona is very athletic defensively, and the best thing to happen to them is their quarterback, Deloria got hurt, and they bring in this kid that is just on fire. He is so good at quarterback, Nafita or something like that. Fafita. Anyway, Chris, I'm telling you, this guy, he's not very big, but he is a really, really good thrower. And you're right, Washington State's just sort of falling apart. And, Oregon's really good, and they're going to win this game. I don't know, by 20, probably by 20. I think Oregon's really solid. And you could tell that game against Washington, that was a heck of a football game.
Duke, Florida State, Knowles 14.5. I think Florida State keeps rolling, don't you?
I think so, but Duke's Riley Leonard's a pretty good player, but he's got a high ankle sprain?
Still, yeah.
So I think I don't think he'll play in this game. So, yeah, I'm Florida State all the way.
Last question, how much ice has USC ordered with Utah coming into town?
Oh, they beat them in the championship game last year, and that's when SC was playing pretty good. Utah wins this game. I can't believe USC's even favored in this game, other than the quarterback can't throw. Caleb Williams can't throw 3 interceptions this week. He just can't. But Utah's solid. I mean, they just beat you up. So that's Utah is much like Notre Dame. It's the same kind of team that just beat USC. Now USC beat themselves a little bit. So, but I think Utah wins the game.
Gary Barnett, Coach, have a good week. Enjoy your bye week, and we'll get caught up again. Thanks for a few minutes.
You bet, Chris. Great being with you.
Good stuff from the coach, Gary Barnett, with us here. Hail Varsity Roadshow, as we're here at the Single Barrel, back Saturday noon to 2, as we have quite the road shows planned, winding down today. And get yourself a whiskey treat. They've got a wall of whiskey that's just flat out incredible. Get down here before Nebraska Northwestern. Get down here before Nebraska and Wisconsin. Awesome stuff. You want to check the podcast out, do so. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio. And can download the interviews. Just great conversation and preview from voice of Husker Volleyball, John Baylor. Good preview there for Nebraska Northwestern from Gary Barnett. Brandon Vogel was with us in hour 1. But noon to 2 here at the Single Barrel on Saturday. We'll wind down a Thursday road show here at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate 9th and P with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We are powered by Hurrdat Sports. Elijah Herbel taking you over to the finish line as Schmidt gets all packed up down at the Single Barrel. He's got a high school football game tonight, so he's making his way across town to Seacrest Field. That'll be for our local listeners on the airwaves of KFOR. So Schmidt getting out just a couple minutes early to give himself adequate time to do a pregame show. So therefore, I will be taking you through the remaining couple minutes of this show. While I have you here, a quick reminder that if you missed any of today's show, you can catch it in its entirety or in segment form wherever you get podcasts: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you like to get your podcasts, you can check it out there. You can also find the Hail Varsity Twitter page. That's at HVarsity Radio on Twitter. And you can find the full show posted up there in podcast form as well. A link to follow posted below the clip that we put up just about every single day on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. Find Chris on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, and find myself, Elijah Herbel, at Herbal Essences. And a lot of good stuff in today's show as we had Brandon Vogel join us back in hour one, a big preview of Nebraska volleyball, their match against Wisconsin coming your way on Saturday, as well as some thoughts on Northwestern and the challenge that they pose on Saturday. So we had Brandon Vogel back in hour one. We also talked about, obviously, the news of the day, Jim Harbaugh and the sign-stealing scandal, which Jim Harbaugh denies. In hour two, we had the voice of Husker Volleyball, John Baylor, lead off this hour two, as he gave his thoughts on what Saturday means. You can find that in podcast form. And as always on Thursdays, we just heard from the coach at Northwestern and Colorado, Gary Barnett, the color man for Colorado's radio broadcast. He joined us for his usual Thursday segment. So all of that available in podcast form. If you prefer the video form, you can find it on Hail Varsity's YouTube page. That usually gets posted up about 90 minutes following the conclusion of today's show. So look for it between about 7:30 and 8 o'clock tonight if you like the video form. Before we get you out of here, a little bit of shameless self-promotion, as Schmidt and myself have been working on a new project with former Husker standout Jabba Chamberlain. That is the Triple Play Podcast. You can also find that wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music. Also, the Hurrdat Sports YouTube channel. You can find that, as we had a good one today that we rolled on, as Phillies hitting coach Kevin Long was kind enough to join us for about 30 minutes on today's episode. He actually joined us from the stadium down in Arizona, Chase Field. He's down outside the dugout talking with us, and was kind enough to join us for that segment to talk about the Phillies' playoff run, to talk about what they faced in the Diamondbacks making it to the postseason, working with guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. And last but not least, he talked about that big ball celebration that the Phillies have been rolling with all postseason long. It was a lot of fun to sit down with him again. That is the Triple Play Podcast. So find that wherever you get podcasts. It's your baseball fix this fall, winter, and spring, as we get into, well, it's called the Triple Play for a reason. There's three of us, and we're talking about the three levels of baseball that we love here in the state of Nebraska. That's high school ball, that is Husker baseball, and that is MLB. And we have somebody who's qualified to talk about each. Me with my high school baseball experience, Jabba with his MLB experience, and Schmitty covering the Huskers. And I can't forget Jabba's time playing high school ball and for the Huskers as well. So we think that's a really, really cool perspective to bring to you every single week. We're going to continue rolling forward with that, and we'll hopefully have some more that we'll be doing for you this spring. We'll let you know about that when we have some more information for you. But check out that podcast. Check out Hail Varsity Radio, wherever you get podcasts, and the Hail Varsity YouTube page. And a reminder, we'll talk to you again tomorrow from 4 to 6. The Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill in La Vista is where we'll be from 4 to 6 tomorrow afternoon. That's when we'll talk to you again.